Hello, welcome to Bite Size. I'm your host, David Byrne. Today we're going to be talking about preserving the American dream through affordable rent and affordable housing. This topic is mostly going to revolve around minimum wage, and I'm going to explain how we're going to get there, but first, a little background. Why are we talking about rent and affordable housing? Well, the issue is corporations and landlords, which nowadays are the same, think BlackRock, they're allied against local governments. 33% of homes sold across the United States in 2023 were sold to corporations. Corporations are about making money. And these corporations are the same ones that build housing. They have no incentive to build affordable housing when they are making money off of escalating rents. Corporate entities can purchase homes with cash that the average Georgian just can't compete with, meaning that Georgians are getting priced out of the market. They can't even buy homes anymore. They find their rent rising, and homes are simply becoming unaffordable. And again, now let's tie this into the wage side. When wages are too low for the cost of living, government will step in through things like Section 8 to ensure people have a place to live, and through food stamps to ensure people can eat. We have programs for almost every necessity you need. You can get it for phones, you can get it for cars, you can get it for all types, transportation, utilities, you name it, we have a subsidy for it. In America's founding, there was a social contract where businesses needed to enable the community to rise and make the community better in order to operate. And somewhere along the lines, we went wrong. So let's talk about minimum wage. So again, we're talking about rent, but minimum wage does tie into whether you can afford to survive. In the top left-hand corner, you see the history of the federal minimum wage. The top line is if you extrapolated what was the minimum wage then, but then you said, okay, this is it against $21. For example, in 1968, it was equivalent to $12 an hour now because of inflation. The bottom line is its slow rise to where it is at $7.25. So you can see it's effectively, in dollar equivalent, been dropping since 1966, 68. In the top right-hand corner, you see the map of various minimum wages across the United States. Most use the federal. Some, such as California, go all the way up to $13 an hour. And as of 2023, California is raising the minimum wage across the state to $20 an hour. This will kill businesses. I originally grew up in a town in Northern California. Very low cost compared to places like San Francisco, LA, San Diego. You didn't need a $20 an hour minimum wage to survive. It was cheap. You just go buy a plot of land for next to nothing. Labor was cheaper. Everything was cheaper. But California is using this sledgehammer approach in order to say we need a $20 an hour minimum wage across California in order to survive. Well, no, that's more than you need in the town I grew up called Durham, California, and it's way less than you need in San Francisco. So it just basically does no one any good. You still can't afford to live in San Francisco, and now all the businesses in Durham are going out of business. It's a sledgehammer approach that is just hurting people and not making anything better. So what can we do about it? We need to tie the minimum wage to where you live and the cost of rent in your area. So I started with talking about making sure rent was affordable. That's the target of this video, is I want to make sure that, and we need to make sure that no matter where you live in the United States, if you have a job for 40 hours a week, the minimum wage is going to ensure that you can pay the fair market rent rate, and it's not going to consume too much of your income. The U.S. Housing and Urban Development Institute already documents fair market rates for every municipality and every county in the United States. As you can see, this is a snip of the 2024 fair market rent documentation system. You can go in, you can pick your state, you can pick your county. If you just pick the state, it will give you a list of all the counties. You can see there I had selected Georgia, Columbia County, which is where I'm at right now. So what does this look like? This is an adaptive minimum wage. The other part of this is, so Metropoles, for example, in Atlanta, it consists of many, many zip codes. So it doesn't really have one fair market rent rate. So in order to do these calculations, if you live in a major metropole and your city has more than one fair market rent rate, use the county. In the left-hand side, you see the list of zip codes and the fair market rent rate per zip code. Well, those, it's too complicated to calculate. So instead, you'd simply use your county that you live in when the metropole has more than one. Every county only has one efficiency rate associated with it. So you would be able to, if you lived in Atlanta, you would find your county that you live in. You would use that fair market rent rate to calculate your minimum wage. Again, the whole point of this is to ensure that every municipality in America has an appropriate minimum wage so that you can afford to live in that area. We're taking away the sledgehammer from the government, but we're also helping people. What do these calculations look like? So I did this calculation for the Augusta, Richmond County area. This covers 2-3 cities in this area as one group. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see where I pulled out the efficiency rate for the Augusta, Richmond County. This also includes Columbia County, which is right next to it. We have an efficiency rate of $805. This is what the U.S. Housing and Urban Development considers to be a minimum, or a fair, not a minimum, a fair market rent for something like a studio. So minimal housing, but fair, $805. So what we do is I came up with a calculation. All economists, agree that housing should not exceed 30% of your income. So what I did was I came up with a calculation to say, okay, if housing is costing you this efficiency rate, in this case, $805 per month, how much would you need to make per hour so that that does not exceed 30% of your income? Now, you'll notice in my calculation there's an 80% multiplier because I said, okay, well, let's make this an absolute minimum wage. So once we've determined what it would be so that this $805 in this case does not exceed 30% of your income, well, we're actually going to say, okay, we're going to take that value and then we're going to multiply it by 80%. So let's do a little example. So see the top formula? R is going to be our efficiency rate of $805. We're going to multiply that by 12 months. That's going to get us our yearly rent. We're then going to divide that by 0.3 in order to calculate, okay, here's how much money you would need to make per year for that to be 30% of your yearly cost. And then we're going to divide that by 2,080 work hours in a year to get your salary, or your hourly salary that would be necessary for housing at the efficiency rate to not exceed 30% of your income. We're then going to multiply that by 0.8 to say, okay, this is an absolute minimum wage. This would make it more like this minimum wage would be 38%, 35 to 38% of your income. But again, we're making this a minimum. I want to work with businesses on this. So in Augusta, Georgia, you see I did that calculation. The minimum wage comes out to $12.38 per hour. This is in a relatively cheap area. This is what you need so that housing by the U.S. Housing and Urban Development Department, or Department of Housing and Urban Development, says this is what you'll need to afford fair market rent in your area. $12.38 an hour for this to not exceed about 38% of your income. This is a true minimum wage, ladies and gentlemen. I did these calculations for Atlanta. Comes out to about $20 an hour. I went to school in San Diego, so I did this calculation in San Diego. I believe it came out to about $38 an hour. $35 to $38 an hour. I was talking to a friend of mine about this. He said, well, my wife makes $38 an hour with a master's degree. How can you tell her that she should only make minimum wage? And I beg you, if you're in San Diego and you're making $38 an hour, I'm not saying you're worth minimum wage. What I'm saying is San Diego has failed you. They have not made housing affordable. You are making the minimum of what you need to make in order to just live there. Let's work together. You are not worth minimum wage. If you have a master's degree, you're doing a good job, you should be making more than minimum wage. This is not about making minimum wage unaffordable. People cannot afford businesses cannot afford a $38 minimum wage. They can't afford $12.38. What this is about is about positioning businesses against landlords. Right now, businesses and landlords are one and the same. But if businesses now are like, I can't afford a $38 minimum wage in San Diego, now businesses have to lobby your county commissioners, your county leadership, your city, your mayor. They have to lobby them to say, we need more affordable housing to bring wages down, because that's the thing about an adaptive minimum wage. It can actually come down if they make more affordable housing. So in San Diego, where it would need to be $35 to $38 an hour, businesses would now, again, say, hey, we're no longer in bed with the landlords because we need more affordable housing, because otherwise we have to leave San Diego because we can't afford to do business here. Again, this is not about making the person who's making $38 an hour minimum wage. This is about aligning businesses to say, hey, we no longer benefit from rising rent rates. We no longer, if we have part of our business makes money off of rent, but part of it is something else, now those two types of businesses are aligned against each other. This is about ensuring that businesses are aligned with cities against landlords to bring rents down and build more affordable housing. And if they refuse to do that, then we're going to ensure that people who are making minimum wage are making enough to live. So let's talk about a little bit more specific, the Democrat side of this argument, because this works for everyone, but we're going to start with Democrats. Defining a fair and accurate minimum wage is vital to the integrity of both our economy and our social contract. It's just blanket, right? I read it verbatim. That's how it is. Economists agree that rent should not exceed 30% of your income. And US HUD already maintains a database documenting 40th percentile gross rents, which is what they consider to be fair market rents. So let's just tie your wage to that. Now we can ensure that everyone can live. By setting a fair minimum wage, corporations will actually invest in their workers, and it'll make a more stable society where people will never, if you have a job, you theoretically should never have a reason to be homeless. And, a fair minimum wage where people can afford to live, it increases consumer spending power in an area. When people can afford to spend more money, it's better for business. It's better all the way around. The Republican side, we're getting rid of that sledgehammer. Adaptive minimum wage ensures that, big cities are not closing businesses in smaller towns with unfair minimum wages. It's truly a minimum per locality. Walmart and Augusta, for example, their base pay is $12.50 an hour. Already above what I calculate of $12.38 as the minimum wage. So really, it'd have no effect in Augusta. But what it would do is it keeps housing affordable, because now rents in Augusta are good. They're actually at a good level, because by my calculation, Walmart, I would consider an entry-level position. Most of the time they used to make minimum wage. And so what this does is this prevents all the landlords in Augusta from saying, we're going to double our rent. Because now that would double that, now Walmart would have to pay $25 an hour. So it keeps housing affordable. Big thing I want to say for Republicans, if a company is paying minimum wage right now, first of all, no one will work for $7.25 an hour anymore. It's just blanket. Let's just start there. But if a company is paying $7.25 an hour, you are padding the bottom line for that company. They are making money off the subsidies that their employees are getting, because their employees are going to get food stamps, they're going to get Section 8, they're going to get all these if they were paying $7.25 an hour, which, like I said, no one works for anymore. But beside the point, this is about making sure that we never have to subsidize corporate bottom lines. Government assistance programs should only serve those who need help, not those who have a full-time job. If you have a full-time job, you should not need any government subsidies, hardly at all. At least not for housing, food. Medical is a whole different thing. It's a different video. But for now, we're talking about housing. And finally, I'd like to conclude with why an adaptive minimum wage is the only answer possible. Laws of supply and demand in America are simply failing. And why? Because companies like BlackRock are both the businesses and the landlords. And they're aligned against cities trying to do affordable housing projects. Supply and demand only works when those two are aligned against each other. But when companies like BlackRock own both the construction companies, they're the landlords, and they're the lobbyists, the law of supply and demand are broken. The middle class is dissolving with rising costs of living because they no longer own a home and they barely can keep up with rent. Adaptive minimum wage is the only solution that ensures landlords are not aligned with business interests, and business interests are now aligned with city leadership and county leadership to make housing more affordable, make housing better. Adaptive minimum wage allows the minimum wage to go down. Again, San Diego example. If San Diego chose to make more affordable housing, then it would go down from needing $35 an hour to, they could get it all the way down to $12 if they wanted to. They'd have to really want to. It'd be a big jump, but they could. Keep that in mind. Minimum wage shouldn't be extremely high, but this forces cities to address whether they have enough affordable housing, because if they don't choose to invest in affordable housing, their minimum wage will go up, and then businesses will have to leave because they won't be able to afford the minimum wage. Or they will. Depends. It's not up to me. It's a business decision. But a business also will be able to lobby and say, we need more affordable housing so that we can afford to pay people to stay here. And lastly, an adaptive minimum wage is the only way to ensure that the minimum wage is appropriate for every city in America. It won't force the minimum wage that's necessary in San Francisco, Atlanta, New York onto small town Augusta. Some even smaller town, the town I grew up in was 5,000 people. We won't have to pay LA's minimum wage. It is extremely important, and I believe this is the only answer to affordable living in America and ensuring that minimum wage is appropriate for everyone. Thank you, everyone. I know this video was a little bit longer. Thank you for sticking with me. Really appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe to this video, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Bite Size.